All right, so a lot of important stuff to talk about as usual. The first thing I want to bring up is schools are going back, um, give or take about a week from now. Either way, some have already went back, some are going back. You got colleges starting back up as well. So I just wanted to point out that I would look for the media and the paranoid virus people to become paranoid again relatively soon. If there is any shred of a increase in cases, they'll be blaming it on that and talking, oh, we got to re-lock down and all this garbage. And there's a lot of people in Alberta paranoid about, oh, there social distancing is pseudoscience. Like I don't understand. Like these people are so ignorant. It's not even funny. But um, schools should be able to go back no problem whatsoever. I mean, it shouldn't even be an issue, but because people are so paranoid that, yeah, that we're probably gonna have to be dealing with. I mean, the reason why people say, oh, it's the new normal, mask wearing and social distancing and all this garbage. Well, the reason it's the new normal isn't because it needs to be. I mean, this whole virus thing should be an afterthought for most people. The reason that it's the new normal is because all the paranoid people out there. So that's the first thing I wanted to point out. But um, I just wanted to point this out from Mike Cernovich, and he says media seamlessly went from protests are peaceful to these riots or false flag operations. And again, I've had I think one or two people comment about this too, and I've seen other people do it too. And um, I don't. Again, I'm not popular enough to have a bunch of haters, but there is some. I can probably count them on one hand, but still, there is some, and it's very funny because when I see these people comment, it just makes me even more confident in what I'm saying because their arguments are terrible. Their arguments are terrible. Like people say, "Oh, this is fake news. It's the Trump supporters are framing these people." Well, your argument for the last 2 months or for a good 2 months has been, oh, it's just peaceful protesting. The idea that there's widespread violence is a myth. And then now the argument is, oh, the Trump supporters are framing them for the violence. Like again, like these people are so ignorant, it's not even funny. And they live in such an echo chamber that they actually think that they can make an argument that blatantly contradicts what they were saying just a month or two ago, or they've made it for a good month or two, and now they're completely contradicting that, like completely contradicting that. And the reason they're doing it isn't because it's true. I mean, the violence has been around the entire time, and next to none of it has anything to do with Trump supporters. I'm sure there's some Trump supporters that are causing violence, but the number is very low. I'd say less than 10% of it people on the right are responsible for. The vast majority of it is people that are the BLM and the far leftists, the Antifa types. That's who's responsible for the vast majority of it. Um, and the reason people are talking about this now is that originally the quote unquote protests were hurting Trump. Originally, they were hurting Trump, like right after George Floyd. But over the last couple months, the Trump has consistently been gaining approval. And why that is because anybody with half a brain recognizes that there's been widespread violence. And number two, anybody with half a brain recognizes that it's the Democrats that are supporting it, egging it on, and justifying it. And again, they flat out admit it. I mean, you have Joe Biden saying yesterday, oh, well, if Trump's elected, there's going to be more violence, basically saying, if you don't elect me, there's going to be violence. Again, so we know that the violence is coming from the left. And the fact that so many people refuse to call it out is absolutely insane. And I mean, getting to this next point here from Six Hexenhammer here, he says, leftists, kill 8-year-old girl, burn down hundreds of buildings, threaten to kill senators, barricade roads, assault old women, throw poo at people, yell about guillotines, build IEDs, applaud murder. And on the right, you have the militia, which simply exists. I mean, you had the peaceful protests, and this was literally a peaceful protest. There was no violence, and by violence I mean literal. The left will say, "Oh yeah, there was violence," but the left's definition of violence is very muddy because they think that people on the right simply having different opinions than theirs equates to violence. But physically assaulting and killing people who disagree with you politically isn't violence. So again, the left's definition of violence is very murky. So that's the one thing you have to find out. And in their minds, simply people having different opinions from them is violence, right? Like that's literally what they believe. Because if you remember that protest in Michigan, what this was even pre George Floyd, where the people showed up open carrying, the left was violence, even though there was no violence, but because they had guns and they were not people that just blindly go along with the government like the leftists tend to do, they equate that to being violent. Again, I had another idiot comment about that. Oh, you're perfectly fine with the violence in No, there was no violence. They were peacefully protesting. Just because they have guns doesn't make it violent. I mean, the same goes for BLM. If they want to protest peacefully, fine. But they haven't been doing that largely, right? Like, they haven't been doing that largely. So anyway, that's the other thing I wanted to bring up too, and not to mention too, the media has been completely lying about that as well. Like completely lying. Um, Rand Paul was like literally almost killed again but by these crazy leftists and the media, not a peep about it. Not one person on the left condemned it, at least prominent person that I can think of. But again, like, the slightest little problem, thing happens on the right, like the Proud Boys will get into a fist fight and beat up some Antifa because, again, Antifa are largely a bunch of scrawny little babies, at least on average, and if they're not armed or in massively outnumber their opponents, then they get destroyed. Um, and nonetheless, yeah, people on the right condemn that stuff. But again, when Antifa literally killed a Trump supporter, or was it BLM? I don't remember which one of those two. I think it was Antifa kills a Trump supporter. Oh, oh, that's perfectly fine. Another Antifa guy almost killed a guy a couple weeks back. Yeah, well, that's perfectly fine. Literally showing up to people's houses, threatening them. Oh, yep, perfectly fine. But again, you do something, the slightest little thing off. I mean, you look at the guy in Ottawa. Shows up to who was it? Was it Freeland's or one of these people's offices and said some stuff that you probably shouldn't have said. But again, um, when you're a public figure and you show up to someone's work, that's not nearly as bad as showing up to someone's house, especially individual people, let alone in a mob. It's pretty easy to defend yourself against an individual person, but not a mob. And that's the thing too. That was like big, massive news when that guy in Ottawa showed up and threatened. I don't remember who it was, but and yeah, they shouldn't have did that. But I mean, should you have the right to criticize public figures? Absolutely. But the way he did it was pretty stupid way, if you ask me. But again, the media was far more all over that than they were of Antifa literally killing a Trump supporter. Like again, like the hypocrisy knows no bounds, I guess is the best way of putting it here. This is from Dinesh D'Souza, and he says the hilarious thing about a white supremacist Richard Spencer embrace of Joe Biden and the Democrats is that Spencer was always the leftist. The left created a fake story by making him the quintessential Trumpster, a poster boy of the alt-right. So what are all these fakers going to say now? Again, this is again one of the big lies in modern culture and especially throughout history, that the racist were the right wingers. Now, is there racist white right wingers? Absolutely. I mean, if I had to guess, the Klan members of the Klan are probably more likely to vote Republican now. But number one, there's like what, 1,000 of them, if that. And the other thing to point out too is um, the vast majority of them throughout history were Democrats, and not to mention too, there is many Democrats that, I mean, it's the Democrats that support the openly racist laws, right? Like the left is the ones that support we're going to let you into college even if you're grossly underqualified if you're black. They're the ones that want to hire based on skin color, like in California wants to repeal the Civil Rights Act so they can do that. So again, it's the Democrats that support all the openly racist laws nowadays, and it's the Democrats that always supported it in the past. So again, that's another big lie that a lot of people believe. This is from Dawn Miller here, and she says, not one of these CBC liberal white women interviewed conservative black woman Leslyn Lewis. Not one of them. Again, the whole point of this is, again, is that the left likes to, oh, we care about diversity, and all this garbage they like to claim they care about, but reality, it's all BS. It's all BS because again, if they actually cared about diversity, why would the whole panel on the leadership, the conservative leadership, especially the conservative leadership race too. Like you think you're covering the conservative leadership race, you'd want to have someone who's a conservative, not someone who's about as biased as you can possibly be to the left hosting it. Barton, and then all the other liberals, and they're all white women. Now again, I could care less about the whole that crap, but again, holding them to their own standards, where are the conservatives? Where are the men? Where are the blacks? Where are the someone other than a hard left white women? Where are they? Obviously they didn't have any, and again, they'll bring some moderate on who's, oh yeah, I'm a staunch conservative, but they only appear as a staunch conservative because they're comparing themselves to people who are either hard left or close to it. So again, that's the lie of diversity. And again, like I pointed out ad nauseum, is that they don't care about diversity. They only care about diversity when it benefits them, right? Like when it benefits them, oh yeah, when they can bring in immigrants from the third world who overwhelmingly vote for them, yeah, they love diversity. But when it comes to public school teachers or university professors, they're like, what, 80, 90% leftist? Yeah, they could care less about diversity because diversity only matters when it benefits them, right? So that's the last thing I wanted to bring up. So if you liked the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Check me out on Twitter, BitChute, and Parler. All those links are in the description, so you can find them all there.